Hey everybody, welcome to the Puck Drops here. This is a new video again in the revisiting. We are in 2003 and we're revisiting the absolutely magical, sensational, and improbable run of the 7-seeded Mighty Ducks of Anaheim in their run through defeating the Detroit Red Wings, the Dallas Stars, and the Minnesota Wild en route to a 7-game series in the Stanley Cup Final against the New Jersey Devils. So I'll go through. We'll obviously go through them, and first, of course, we'll go through the rosters as we've been doing, explaining what ended up happening and how the season went. Mike Brown, winger. They had Dan Bilesma, a good winger near the end of his prime, but he was a guy that was a scorer and a mucker. He later became a Stanley Cup championship winning coach for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Stanislav Shistov, Mark Sharonard, and then Matty Cullen, one of the only players in the National Hockey League that was on that Mighty Duck team. He's a good little center. He was good for them at that time. A really fast guy as he was younger at that point. Jonathan Hedstrom, the absolute scoring touch of Paul Kariya, Petr Kjellberg, Jason Krog, Mike Leclerc, Andy McDonald, big-time defensive Duck who ends up winning the Stanley Cup in 2006. Big Rob Niedermeyer taken from the Florida Panthers. Adam Oates, former Capital, he gets brought in with some playoff pedigree. Sammy Paulson, Steve Ruchin, Kevin Sawyer, Cam Severson, another winger. The wingers were high. Alexei Smirnov, Peter Sikora. Peter Sikora, who was taken in an early trade with the New Jersey Devils, and the Czech came in to play for the Anaheim Ducks as well. Steve Thomas, the former Leaf, Robert Vachelvik, and Lance Ward. On defense, Big Keith Carney and Nicholas Havelid, good players that they had. Chris O'Sullivan, Freddie Ollison, who is another great player. The former Avalanche, Sandis Ozilish, Ruslan Saleh. These are defensemen that would get to the middle under the Mike Babcock system that he had there in Anaheim that played exceptional. Kurt Sauer, Pavel Trinka, and Vitaly Vishnevsky. These were fast puck-moving defensemen in a physical game that helped the Anaheim Ducks do so well. They had young rookie goaltender Ilya Brizgalov as the backup, along with Jean-François Domhaus, who played 2 years earlier with the Devils. Martin Gerber as well was a veteran backup goalie, but their guy was JSG, John Sebastian Jaguar. The year that he had with the goalie average by Jean Sebastian Jaguar was absolutely incredible. And Jean Sebastian Jaguar had a thing of 65 games played. Games started 64. He was 34-22 in the regular season and 6. A goalie average of 2.30, a .920. Absolute incredible by J.S. Jaguar. So we'll look at the playoffs, and if you look at the NHL standings, it was very deceiving because the Anaheim Ducks, Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, were not sitting at a high spot. They were second in their Pacific Division, one of two teams belonging with the number 1 seed Dallas Stars to make the postseason. And 40-27, they were the 7 seed, and they ended up playing the defending champion Detroit Red Wings, who were the 2 seed in the first round of the conference of that year. So they began play first in Joe Louis Arena against the Detroit Red Wings. And this was a game that the Detroit fans thought was going to go. The Detroit fans thought was going to be short in a short series. But this was another of these games that went an extraneous amount, and it went 3 overtimes. And Detroit had a draconian amount of shots, 64 shots on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, and he only let in 1 goal, and it was early in the first period. The Ducks had 44 shots on goal until they eventually beat the Red Wing goaltender in Curtis Joseph. Brendan Shanahan was the first player for the Red Wings to score in that playoff year. 4:15 in the first period made it 1-0 Red Wings, and then Adam Oates' first playoff goal as an Anaheim Duck, 15:33 into the first, tied the game at 1. There was nothing until the third period, and then 3:18 into that triple overtime, Correa finally got a goal in the playoffs, his first playoff goal. He went topside on Curtis Joseph, and he made it 2-1, a shocker in Joe Louis Arena, a 1-0 series lead for the Ducks. The last time they had played them was in the second round in 1998, and they were swept. 1997, excuse me, and they were swept right out of their own building and out of the Detroit building. But they now had a 1-0 series lead. Now they went to Detroit again for game number 2, and Detroit knew that they had to apply the pressure. They got 36 shots on goal on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, and they got 2 of them to go. And Anaheim was able to get 23 shots on goal on Curtis Joseph, and 3 power play chances for the Ducks, 2 for the Red Wings, none converted. And then the first period started, and the first guy to score for the team was the Anaheim Ducks. They did score to Stanislav Shistov, the rookie Russian defenseman, made it 1-0 Ducks. Jason Woolley, the former Sabre, a big pickup by the Red Wings, 2:14 into the second period, ties the game for the Red Wings. And 4 minutes later, Luc Robitaille comes in on the short side, beats Giguère to give a 2-1 lead to the Detroit Red Wings. 13:34 into the third period, where it's still 2-1 Red Wings, the Ducks find a way to score, and it's Jason Krog who gets the goal to tie the game, and passes by Niedermayer and Ozolish, and Steve Thomas gets the game winner. Scotty Niedermayer helped too with 4:15 left. Stevie Thomas scores the goal, makes it 3-2 Ducks, and sends Anaheim back to the pond with a 2-0 series lead. In a third straight game, this becomes a 1-goal game, and Detroit peppers Giguère with 37 shots, 26 shots by Anaheim, 1 power play goal for the Red Wings and none for the Ducks. Sammy Paulson scores the first goal for the Ducks. It's in the second period, and Shistov put the assist on. 2:31 into the second period to make it 1-0 Mighty Ducks. Then in the third period, 1:44 in, the eventual game winner gets scored by Shistov to make it 2-0 Ducks. Tommy Holmstrom, who was one of the all-time rough and tough Red Wings, with 6 minutes left, Holmstrom, with passes from Lidstrom and Fedorov, gets a power play goal to cut the lead in half, but it wasn't enough. And now the Red Wings head into Game 4, a game away from being eliminated. And to the pond for the 4th straight game. It's a 1-goal game. And Detroit, again, knowing that they needed to win, fired 34 shots on goal, 34 shots on Giguère, solved him only twice. And the Anaheim Mighty Ducks had 3 goals, scoring 27 shots on Giguère. The first period started 13:23 into the first period for the first playoff goal of his unimaginable record-breaking, wonderful career. Rookie Henrik Zetterberg scored a first goal for the Detroit Red Wings. 2 minutes later, Paul Correa sends the hometown hometown fans into a rapid frenzy by scoring a game-tying goal. Then Jason Krog scores in the third period, 4:35 in, to make it 2-1 Ducks. And with only 2:15 left in the third period, Sergei Fedorov ties the game and makes it 2-2. And in overtime, the Red Wings are gassed on their defense. They have several defensemen out, such as Schneider and Chelios, who have been gassed. They're trying to take the puck all the way out, and they can't. And who ends up pouncing on it is a Steve Ruchin. And Steve Ruchin is able to score low side, the famous call, of course, being Hockey Town is now Golf Town. And Anaheim ends up sweeping the Detroit Red Wings with a low goal on Curtis Joseph. That was a wonderful, unbelievable goal that swept the Red Wings and sent the Ducks to the second round for the second time in franchise history. They would begin to now play would begin to play the number one seed, the Dallas Stars. And the series started in Dallas, and this game ended up going to an unimaginable 5 overtimes. A 5 overtime game, and Jason Krog again scored the first goal, 13:08 into the first period for Mausalish for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. 54 shots on goal by the Anaheim Ducks, 63 by the Dallas Stars. Darian Hatcher, a little more than 2 minutes left in the first period, tied the game for the Stars. And 4:04 into the second period, Robbie Niedermeyer got a goal, shorthanded high, to end up beating Marty Turco. And Steve Ruchin got a goal to make it 3-1 at this point. There's a pass by Leclerc, 8:58 into the second period to make it 3-1 Anaheim. Now former Devil, who's now a Star, Jason Arnott, comes in about 16 minutes played in the second period, cuts the lead in half. And then in the third period, 17-13 in, the young forward Brendan Morrow ties the game. Game goes to overtime, double overtime, triple overtime, quadruple overtime, nothing. And then 48 seconds into that fifth period, that eighth period, 8 periods later, Sikora finally ends it right over Marty Turco, and the Ducks have a 1-0 series lead and are now 5-0 in the playoff year. Back in American Airlines Center in Dallas, Anaheim gets 27 shots on Marty Turco, scoring 3 of them. And Dallas gets 31 shots on Jaguar. And in that period, Leclerc scored first for the Ducks, 13 minutes to play in the first. Then Niedermeyer later in the second with 6 minutes left in the second. And Brendan Morrow scored another goal with 5 minutes into the third period. And then with only 2 minutes remaining in the third period, Mike Madonna scored a tying goal for the Dallas Stars, sending it to overtime, and Dallas trying to tie the series going down there to Anaheim. And the game-winning goal ended up being scored in that overtime game by Leclerc. And Leclerc was able to just push it under the pad of Marty Turco and the Mighty Ducks continued not to lose and took out the Dallas Stars in overtime and headed back to Anaheim up 2-0 improbably. Now again, for the seventh straight time, it was a 1-goal game, but this time the Ducks would not be able to win it. They had 32 shots on Marty Turco, and the Dallas Stars had 32 shots on Jean-Sebastien Giguère. In the first period, it was Jere Lehtinen 224 in for the Dallas Stars. Steve Ruchin with 351 remaining in the first period. Steve Ruchin tied the game for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Jere Lehtinen got his second goal, 341 into the second, making it 2-1 Dallas for a power play goal, and that Lehtinen goal was the game winner for Jere Lehtinen, and it was a game that was won for the Dallas Stars, and it set the series at 2-1. Then it was back to Anaheim, and it was Anaheim's first loss of the playoff year. And Anaheim had 22 shots on Marty Turco, and Dallas had 28 shots on 28 shots on Giguère. And for the first time, as good as Anaheim was, Jean-Sebastien Giguère did not get a shutout. And here he did get the shutout that he really wanted. And it was a game that was not settled into the third period. In the first period and second period, no one scored until Mike Leclerc with 2:41 left in the third period scored the only goal, the game-winning goal, on a power play on Marty Turco to give the Anaheim Mighty Ducks going back down to Texas a 3-1 stranglehold. And now the series shifted back to Dallas, and the Stars gained the control that they desperately wanted. The Stars ended up getting 25 shots on goal on Jean-Sebastien Giguère. But for Anaheim, they only had 15 shots on goal on Marty Turco, and it was really a testament to the work that the defense did. Just clear. It was just absolute clear. It was just absolute clear dominance by the Dallas Stars. And 9:20 into the first, Rob DeMille scored for the Dallas Stars. Stu Barnes, 14:20 in, the former Sabre, scored to make it 2-0 Stars. Nico Kapanen, 18:10, with only 1:10 remaining, or 1:50 remaining in the second period. Nico Kapanen made it 3-0 Stars, the shorthanded goal. Paul Kariya got the only goal of the game for the Ducks, 4:02 into the third. And 15-12 into the third, Kapanen got another goal for the Dallas Stars, and Dallas sent it back to Anaheim. And for the first time at all, the Ducks were involved in a game that was not a 1-goal game. Now Anaheim headed back up to California for a game number 6, and Anaheim was going to try to go to the conference final for the first time in their history and have a Californian team in the conference final for the first time since 1993 when the Kings made it. 5:10 into the first, the Stars ended up getting 29 shots. We say, again, on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, and the Ducks had 26 shots on Marty Turco. The Stars scored first in Anaheim, 5:10 in. Kirk Muller, and the Stars obviously trying to send it back to Game 7. Stevie Thomas, 2:25 into the second, tied the game at 1. Stanislav Chistov, 4:23 into the second, made it 2-1 Ducks. Nico Kapanen, 14:20 in the second, his fourth goal of the playoff year, and his third goal against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks tied the game at 2. Ruslan Saleh gave the Ducks the lead by a pass by Stevie Thomas and Sammy Paulson, 3:22 in this classic, and 14:49 in. Brendan Morrow scored on a power play to tie the game. And with only 1:06 remaining in the third period, Sandros Ozolish, one of the heroes in the Detroit series, ended the series late in the third period for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks and sent them to the conference final and eliminated the one-seeded Stars. And for the first time, the Ducks were in the conference final, but as they were the underdogs against two-seeded Detroit, and they were the underdogs to the one-seeded Stars, and because the Stars beat the Oilers, they were not going to have home ice throughout the entire Western Conference. And at this point, they were going to be a road team anyway, and they were now a road team against another Cinderella story, who ended up beating the Colorado Avalanche and then ended up beating the Vancouver Canucks, the Minnesota Wild. And they went to the XL Energy Center in St. Paul, and the Ducks seemed to be the more superior team because the Wild had a good goaltender in Mario Fernandez, but the real team ran on the second-year forward in Marian Gaborik. And the Wild had 39 shots in a double overtime game on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, but he stopped every single shot. The Mighty Ducks had 26 shots on Fernandez and got one past him. No goals in the first, second, third overtime, but in double overtime, 8:06 in, Peter Sikora got his second goal of the playoff year, first time since against the Detroit Red Wings as an Anaheim Duck, and won the hockey game and gave the Ducks a 1-0 series lead in this conference final. For the third time all playoff year, the Ducks got involved in a game that was not a one-goal game, getting 22 shots on Fernandez, scoring 2 of them. And for the third time in 4 games, Minnesota got 24 shots on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, another shutout for Jean-Sebastien Giguère. For the first period, there were no goals. Second period, Kurt Sauer for the Mighty Ducks scored 7:24 in, and it was a shorthanded goal. Robbie Niedermeyer, 8:06 into the third, scored the only other goal, and so it was Sauers, which was the game winner, and sent the Ducks back home with a 2-0 series lead. Now the Ducks headed back home for Game 3 and had the largest margin of victory all game long, and for the third straight game, it was another shutout for Jean-Sebastien Giguère. He faced 35 shots, stopped them all. Fernandez had 35 shots past him, and 4 went in. In the first period, 4:59 in, it was Steve Ruchin for the hometown team, making it 1-0 Ducks. 8:20 into the second, it was Korea solving the Minnesota goaltender, making it 2-0. And Stanislav Shistov, 12:16 into the second, made it 3-0 Ducks. And 13:51 in the second period, Korea finished it off with 2-second goal and 4-0 Ducks. And another shutout for Giguère. He was absolutely on fire, and it got the Mighty Ducks to a game number 4. Another one-goal game. Finally, it was the first since game number 1, one-goal game. This was not a shutout for the Anaheim Ducks, even though they had 28 shots on goal on on Fernandez, and the Wild had 25 shots on Jean-Sebastien Giguère. He only gave up 1. That one was Andrew Burnett, the hero of the Colorado series, 4:37 in. Adam Oates, 8:30 into the first, tied the game with a power play goal. And with another power play goal, 9:31 in the second, Adam Oates got the series winner, the conference clincher, and the game-winning goal on a power play as well. former Capital, was huge in this game, and the Ducks swept the Minnesota Wild and headed on to the Stanley Cup final as an underdog team. And what a game and what a culture shock this was. The Anaheim Ducks is a 7 seed, were able to win on the road so many times, as good as Jaguar was. But it wasn't enough in Continental Arena, where they were playing the Eastern Conference champion New Jersey Devils, who had gone past the Boston Bruins, the Maple Leafs, and they got past the Ottawa Senators in 7 for being up 3-1. So they knew versatility, they knew difficulty, and the Devils came out running, and they came out with a passion. The Ducks got 16 shots on goal on Marty Brodeur, and the Devils had 30 shots on goal on Jean-Sebastien Giguère. No power play goals for either team. The first was Jeff Friesen, 1:45 into the second period. He scored first. There were no goals in the first period. Friesen had an unbelievable postseason already, especially great goals against the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Grant Marshall, 5:34 into the third, scored to make it 2-0 Devils, and Friesen got his 7th of the year in the playoffs. Colin White assist, and it actually came out from behind by Marty Brodeur. It was a goalie assist, and it was an empty netter with only 22 seconds left. Friesen just put the nail in the coffin and made it 3-0 Devils for game number 1. And a shutout, of course, for Marty Brodeur. In game number 2 was an actual, almost identical mirror image of what happened in game number 1. New Jersey got 25 shots on Jean-Sebastien Giguère, scored 3 times, and the Ducks only had 16 shots on Marty Brodeur, and Brodeur stopped all of those shots, as good as that Devil defense was in clearing shots away. The 3 goals for the New Jersey Devils, the one first happening in the first period, 6:34 in. Jeff Friesen, again, he was on fire. Later, 5 minutes left in the second, Scott Gomez scored, and 3 minutes left in the second, Patrick Elias scored, making it 3-0 New Jersey Devils. Nothing more, and Brodeur would stop every shot and get his second straight shutout. And for the first time since that Game 4 against Minnesota, the Ducks would win, and the Ducks would have a 1-goal game again. 33 shots. They have far more at home on Marty Brodeur, scoring 3 of them, including 1 in overtime. The Devils had 31 shots on Giguère and scored 2 goals. None of those were power play. No goals again in the first period. Second game in 3 games this had happened. Mark Chenard scored the first goal in franchise history of a Stanley Cup final game in Anaheim. Elias, 14:02 in, tied the game. Sandis Ozilish, about 40 seconds later, made it 2-1 Ducks. Scott Gomez, 9:11 into the third, tied the game at 2. And then Ruslan Saleh, who scored a great goal by the side of the net, as the puck was immediately lifted off a deflected shot and a face-off. And if any of you are wondering, that Ozilish goal that I had previously mentioned is the famous one where Marty Brodeur tries to come and cover the puck, and he loses his stick and dives over. He got tied up and lost his stick, the famous call by Gary Thorne. So if any of you were wondering that. Ruslan Saleh in the middle, score Saleh, overtime game winner. The Ducks are back in it. That goal, a beautiful deflection in, and it gave the Ducks life in a series that they were doomed to be in previously before this game. Another 1-goal one. In Game 4 was another 1-goal game, and again it went past 3 periods. This one went 4 as well, and it was a quick one. The Anaheim Mighty Ducks got 26 shots on Marty Brodeur. The Devils had 26 shots on Giguère, but this time they couldn't solve Jean-Sebastien Giguère. No power play goals again, nothing in the first, second, or third, but 39 seconds into the overtime, right off the face-off, again they had a face-off goal. It was Stevie Thomas who scored to make it 1-0 Ducks, and a game winner that tied the series and sent it back to Continental Airline in New Jersey for a massive meeting with the Anaheim Ducks, and this was a game that they would have liked to forget. They only had 23 shots on Marty Brodeur. Brodeur stopped most of 20 of those shots. He let up 3 goals, but the Devils had 37 shots on Giguère, and Giguère let up 6 of them. 31 saves, which is a good performance, but it wasn't good enough for the Anaheim Ducks. Sikora, 42 seconds in, spited his former team in his former team's building to make it 1-0 Ducks. But then 3:35 in the first, 2 minutes and a half later, Pascal Remo, a rookie for the Devils, made it 1-1. Patrick Elias, 7:45 in the first, 4 minutes later, made it 2-1 Devils on a power play goal, the first power play goal of the series by either team. Steve Ruchin, 12:15 in the first, tied the game, so they came to the second period, tied at 2, and then the roof caved in on the Mighty Ducks. This is really the game that changed this series. Brian Giunta, 3:12 into the second period, made it 3-2 Devils, his first goal of the playoffs. After a red-hot year the previous year, even though losing to the Hurricanes, he had a ice-cold playoff, but he came in with his first goal, and it was a big one for the New Jersey Devils. Sammy Paulson, 6:35 into the second, tied the game at 3. Jake Pandolfo, 9:02 into the second, made it 4-3 Devils. Then in the third, Jamie Langenbrunner, 5:39 in the third, made it 5-3 New Jersey. And 12:52 into the third, he iced it all up with another goal right past Giguère to make it 6-3, and he gave the Devils a 3-2 series lead. And when they went to the pond, the cup was in the building for the Devils taking. But it would not be for the Mighty Ducks, or the Devils, in this game. The Devils had 28 shots on Jean-Sébastien Giguère. They only had 2 of those go in. The Ducks had a measly 24 shots go on Marty Brodeur, but they scored 5 of those. In the first period, 4:26 in, Steve Ruchin scored first for the Ducks. About 7 minutes later, Ruchin scored again to make it 2-0. And Steve Thomas, 15:59 to the first, made it 3-0 on a power play goal. It already was 3-0, but at this point, right before the Steve Thomas goal, the Ducks were moving the puck across the center side, and as Correa let the puck go to Ruchin, he was absolutely slammed like a Mack truck by the great Devil defenseman Scott Stevens. And he was thought to be out until the next season, just laid out, absolutely crushed. But he later would return in the second period. 2:18 in the second, Jay Pandolfo finally scored for the Devils to make it 3-1. And then Correa, in his second shift back from the injury, skated off the left side after getting a great pass from Sikora. And, of course, the classic line, Paul Correa, the fans want one, by Gary Thorne. Score on the floor, off the floor, on the board, Paul Correa. With only 3 minutes left in the second period, it really took the air out of the Devils' dressing room and buried the coffin at that point. An absolute feathering lifter of a shot over the shoulder of Marty Brodeur, who couldn't get to it. Sikora scored against his former team in the third period, 3:57 in, to make it 5-1 on a power play goal. 10:46 in the third, Grant Marshall scored to make it 5-2, the deficit, but it was too late. And the Ducks would hold on, and they would win an amazing Game 6 and go to Game 7. In Game 7, the same score as Game 2 and Game 1, anticlimactic. The Devils got another shutout, the third shutout of the playoff series for Marty Brodeur. Again, no power play goals, basically the same thing as 1 and 2. 25 shots on goal for the New Jersey Devils, 24 for the Mighty Ducks. Nothing in the first period. Mike Rupp scored 2:22 in to make it 1-0 Devils. Jeff Friesen, 12:18 in the second, to make it 2-0 New Jersey, and freeze in 16-16 into the third, made it 3-0 New Jersey Devils, and the Devils for the second time in 4 years won the Stanley Cup. And what an incredible accomplishment it was, but no one will, even though the Anaheim Ducks do end up winning the Stanley Cup in 2007, and we will discuss partially about that when I do the 2007 Ottawa Senators video. This Anaheim Duck team is one of the great teams never to win the Stanley Cup that people will remember, especially Anaheim fans, for the rest of their lives. When Babcock brought the team back after the Game 7 loss, they were saluted by their fans, beating the Detroit Red Wings, sweeping them, beating the Stars in 6 when the Stars were coming back, sweeping the Wild to show who was the real underdog, and sending a championship pedigree Devil team to 7 games and winning every single game on home ice. Absolutely amazing, including 5+ overtime contests. So definitely a Duck team we won't soon forget. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, sub, be on it all the time. I really would appreciate it for my content. And happy hockey. Have a great rest of the day. The next one, I'm not sure when I do it, but the next one will be on the 2004 Western Conference champion Calgary Flames. That will be a good one. And we will get to revisit our friend, if you had watched the previous video, Marty Jelena. So have a good night again. Happy hockey.